So, welcome to another episode of Beta Talk. Today, I'm joined by Leah Robson. You've heard Leah on the podcast before. She's the director, co-founder of Your Energy, Your Way, and I wanted to bring Leah on to discuss a recent. Well, she'll tell us all about it, but it's something that she did at Westminster. So, firstly, I'd like to thank my sponsor, which is Primary Pro, which make an outside pipe lagging system, especially useful for these heat pumps we're all installing. So, Leah, what was the show? So, what was it you were at the other day?
So it was a select committee hearing for the DESNES working group on skills and workforce in the green jobs area.
That sounds nice. And I remember you rang me up just before you were going to go and give your evidence, and we had a chat, didn't we? And then luckily Matthew Aylett at the Energy Department sent me the link because I'm rubbish at finding these links, so that I could watch it. I watched you live, and I thought you did an amazing job. So congratulations on that. I thought you did really, really well because I suppose
Oh,
lots of
thank
people.
you. It
I suppose
felt
lots.
really, it was hard actually, because it felt like they were kind of coming from a level, I'm using my hands, but up here, and I was kind of coming from a level down there, and it was hard to make that join between the stuff that they were interested in and the stuff that I thought was important. So I'm glad it came across well because it felt, yeah, it felt a tricky thing to do.
Well, they
Uh,
had two. They had two sessions, didn't they? Yours was the second session,
mm.
and you were giving evidence with another gentleman who I don't know, but I thought he did a quite a good job as well. I can't remember his name. Um, and so is it just to say the title again? What's the title?
Let me you talk a minute and I'll look it up and I'll give you the full and official title
Because is
so
it
that we
something
don't
they're
we
setting up to create a better workforce or around the whole thing of energy? It's not just us in heat pumps; it's things about power generation as well, isn't it? And
it's about the whole green jobs agenda. So yeah, they've been having hearings for quite some time. So they did a consultation and invited people to submit written responses. And then some of the people who submitted written responses then got invited to give verbal feedback. And actually, I have to shout out to Elora Coop, who actually kind of put me up for it because she'd gone to the effort of submitting a written response and I didn't, and she then got invited to go and do the verbal response and couldn't make it, so invited me along, and I am still looking in my email for the actual title.
where's Laura from?
Laura, so she runs an organization called Her Retrofit Space.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so she's very keen to support women professionals in the heating and buildings area.
That's right. I'm connected with her on
Yeah,
her
you
LinkedIn, and
probably.
I did a LinkedIn post
Mhm.
about your little talk, and I noticed. I think she retweeted it actually.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So you were obviously there, sort of representing SMEs, and uh, I mean, you and I have discussed things around training for green jobs a lot, and I'm well known for discussing it, and I'm probably well known for being a little bit critical about how we're training people, and I hold my hands up. I probably don't get across my concerns in a way that's beneficial and people might understand, but I think you do. And funny enough, you started to talk about the training, and then the bell went for a recession. Some people had to go away and do some voting, I think, and I was a bit gutted that you weren't able to sort of elucidate further about that point. But I suppose it gives you, if anyone wants, I'll put a link to this thing in the show in the podcast show notes where they can go and watch this event you were at because it's still up there. And that bell kind of marks the poignant spot for me because you wanted to talk about we've got this situation where people are going on 3 day courses and they're getting the qualification, which means they can now go and install heat pumps. They can now go and join MCS. And you were trying to sort of elucidate this point. Well, actually, that's not as helpful. Uh, it's not helpful to you who wants to take on competent engineers, is it?
No, I mean that's the problem. I mean, yeah, as you say, I was kind of a little bit cut off, and I don't know if I picked it up totally after the voting. But yeah, for me, if I'm looking for a gas engineer who is interested in coming to work for me as a heat pump installer, what I'm looking for are the things that you talk a lot are about, hunger to learn, thirst for knowledge. So I'm looking for them to have gone away and done some training even while they were a gas engineer. Um, Now, if you were to ask me specifically what training, that BPEC course would not be at the top of my list. I'd be looking for someone who's gone out themselves and done the Kimbo training, or who's done the Heat Geek course. You know, those who's listened to your podcast. Those are the things that I find engineers are learning more from than going on that course, because I've sent a couple of people that I've then taken on. I've sent them on that course, and they've come back saying, well, we learnt more working for you for the last 3 months than we actually did on that course. And the guy knew less than the engineers who already work for me. So yeah, that's a real concern, that there's so much money going into that course. Most, yeah, definitely.
It's worth picking up. It's BPEC and LCL awards.
Yeah.
They're the two awarding bodies that do that course. Um, yeah, I mean that fits in with, so there's two. So Beta Teach has got two kind of philosophies, and one of those philosophies is to activate people as autonomous or self-directed learners. So what you're looking for, if I had a company, I would be looking for people that have already took ownership of their own learning under their own volition. They've gone off and done some training, or like you said, done a Kimbo course, etc. So they're passionate about learning something. It's very easy for someone to see an advert, go and get a free BPEC or LCL awards and become qualified in heat pumps, because a lot of engineers out there would like the fact that they've got this qualification. It looks good on their website, so off they go. They're not really interested in that. Not all of them, but some of them are not that interested in learning stuff because there's no evidence that they've been learning stuff previously. So off they go. They get that qualification. And one of the things, I had Charlotte Lee on from the Heat Pump Association the other day, and she knows I'm critical of this course because the Heat Pump Association kind of support it. And she said, well, she made the point that the course is sort of like the start of your journey to learning. Now, I would actually say that's a bit problematic. That's the actual qualification. We're giving people a qualification after 3 days. It's not really the start of their learning. It's a bit like saying, come and be a doctor. We'll pay £500 for you to get the qualification in 3 days. Then you start learning.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
and because the comms around this course, because there's been some more money again. I think 5 million has been, because it stopped a couple
Mm.
of months ago, the heat training grant, and then there's more taxpayers' money been marked for it, 5 million, I think. But I think we're wasting taxpayers' money. I mean, it's not as if we haven't been talking about this issue, and it's you've got training centres that are the real winners in this because they're basically getting free money. And you
Mm.
mentioned something about the instructors. So you and I, your students. I've trained some of your students at the Nesta offices. I would bet anyone that them students, them girls, are way more know more about heat pumps than most of the assessors and trainers on these BPEC and LCL awards courses. I'd,
Yeah,
I'd,
and
I'd
that's
put my
that's
hat
the
on that.
worry, isn't it? Yeah, that's the worry. And I suppose I came out of the session thinking, hopefully I got some of my points across, but have I actually formulated in my head, or did I put across to them what some of the ideas to do things better might be? Because we're all so good at kind of
Yeah,
carping and saying, oh, it's just a load of rubbish, it's a waste of this. But what are what are the other alternative ways of doing it? And so I guess I did bring out the Nesta
yeah,
pilot that they're doing, where they're giving people who've done the course access to a heat pump to install in their own house. It'll be really interesting to see how that kind of goes. Um, I was able, it was a really nice thing actually, because I don't think brilliantly well on my feet. And they said, if there's anything that you wanted to say but didn't say, you're very welcome to submit written evidence after the session, which was really nice. So I actually sent them all my notes and a few of the things that I thought, oh, I wish I'd kind of put that across. And in that evidence, I did give a shout out to people like Barry Sharp, who are doing that hard work of mentoring and helping people who get into the industry and helping them to actually kind of move on from that first step of getting qualified, which, as you say, is weird. But anyway, if they've got that first step, what do we do then as an industry to help those people further into their learning? And you know, I think the Heat Geek course is great. I've dabbled in it. I've never fully completed it, I have to confess. Um, but I feel like there must be other ways. I'm not sure anyone's quite cracked it. Of how do we get people to continue their learning whilst on the job? And
Mm.
yeah, I don't know if you've got any ideas, but and maybe that gets us around this whole problem of not having the right instructors. Because if you've got guys who are out there day in, day out fitting heat pumps, maybe the trick isn't to take them off fitting heat pumps and put them in colleges and get them to teach people. Maybe the trick is to give them the tools to be teachers, because some of them are naturally very good at it, and others of them are naturally quite terrible at it and will never be good. But others could be better if they maybe had a bit of coaching. So I don't know, is there a scheme that somebody could run? I'm sorry, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, really. But is there a scheme someone could run to say to engineers who are interested in taking on apprentices, we will support you in taking on an apprentice? Because one of the things I
You
think, make
mentioned the Valent,
yeah.
didn't you?
Yeah, and also I think Valent, brilliant scheme. What if like Valent wrapped that round with a package of, okay, well, we've employed these apprentices. We're going to give you free access to one of them, which is, great. And Emma from IMS Heat Pump says that's working really well for them. But what if that also came with a little package of work to upskill her engineers to be better trainers of apprentices? Because as we know, some are good at that. Some could do with some hints and tips about how to do it better. And we've got all this amazing technology around us. There's
Mm.
got to be ways, you can put on a pair of glasses and be demonstrating something to someone when you're not even at the same site as they are, can't you? You could be off at a different site from your apprentice and have a pair of glasses that's videoing oh, just by the way, apprentices, this is what I did today. Came across this slightly tricky thing, thought you might like to know. Pop it to them on WhatsApp and they watch it in the evening.
Mm.
There's stuff we could be doing, and I have to confess, it frustrates me, but I don't have the time to do it because I'm trying to run a heat pump business. But yeah, it really, I'd really love to hear what maybe some of your other engineers who listen to the podcast think, because we should be doing a better job of enabling engineers out there on the tools to train apprentices. That's
But
got to be doable.
there's a few points, so I want to pick up on this. So as we all know, and it's kind of common sense, we know this. You're going to learn about any industry, I suppose, if you're on the job doing it.
Mm,
Not in colleges. Doesn't matter how good a lecturer is. I'm a good lecturer, but that's not. It's your students are learning far more out with the engineers that they're doing that day-to-day job with. So you made a point there, is because some engineers, if they have got an apprentice, how do they offer effective feedback to help
mm,
with that
yep.
learning process? So feedback is a really interesting thing with education. Anyone who's interested, there's a guy called Dylan William who sort of wrote the sort of paper on this around 2005. How effective feedback is very, or has a very high impact on learning if it's
Mm,
delivered right and timely. So yeah, you could train some engineers if they're interested. Obviously, USMEs need to be supported taking on these apprentices because that's a real tough one, and that's why this Valent thing is a good model. It could be scaled
mm,
up maybe with other manufacturers, so that they're covering a lot of the costs for USMEs. Now, going back to this whole thing around train the trainer, the real weird thing is going on, and it's been going on for years within training, is so there's a lot of training centres around this country, a lot that are doing the 5 yearly gas assessments, because
mm,
everyone that's is working on gas has to get every 5 years, they have to retake their assessments and their tests. Now, these training centres around the country have got their qualified assessors assessing people on the gas. Now, these assessors will probably have come from the gas industry, they've installed boilers or etc., and they've got their assessors award. What's been happening is these training centres will say to these assessors, go on that heat pump course for 3 days,
mm,
because when you come back, because you're a qualified assessor, you're now qualified to teach that course for me at my training centre. And
Wow.
that's what's happening. So I would argue most of the assessors out there and the ones delivering the training have never worked with heat pumps. So you imagine your girls, your apprentices going on that course.
Mm,
They are listening to people, nice people, and I'm a big actually. I'm a bit of an advocate. You don't always have to be that knowledgeable in a particular area you're training because it's about facilitating learning. You don't have to sometimes always be an expert,
mm,
and there's lots of evidence around that. But there are people going on this course, listening to trainers deliver 3 days of PowerPoint, which everyone seems to think's great. The Heat Pump Association has still sort of not sort of agreed with it and said that because I did a little bit of an experiment at the Ground Source Heat Pump Association that sort of proved that kind of
mm.
delivery doesn't work and that kind of assessment doesn't work. But yet that's what's going on. And it's what now is being funded again, another 5 million. So it's a real big issue that, I know the local training centre to me, the manager, the owner, rubbed his hands when that heat training grant came out and said, that's going to buy me my next Porsche.
Yeah.
Because that £500 per person goes direct to them. And the biggest training company in this country, who arguably knew quite more than most about, and I've got to be careful what I say here, about that heat training grant when it was first engendered, then thought, oh, I won't just have one training centre, I'll go national. And they teamed up with a one of our largest national merchants. So they're all around the country. So they're making tens of thousands every week from that course. And it's not a good course. And it
No.
harks back to this. That's a little bit similar. There are people in the know about all this funding. So if you look at MCS, and this isn't being derogatory to MCS at all, this is way back when they first started. So before MCS started, there was a lot of money being made by insulation companies that were getting lots and lots of money from funding to insulate homes. Lots of money. I mean, there's people out there that became millionaires over it.
Mhm.
Some of those insulation companies were very aware that MCS was being started up. The first three MCS companies to be on the MCS register were insulation companies, no knowledge about heating whatsoever, let alone heat pumps, no knowledge about
Mm.
heating. The fourth company did have some knowledge about heating, but admitted they didn't know too much about heat pumps. That's my favourite engineer, who's been going on ever since and learnt from his mates. That's Steve Webster. But so
Um,
you have these entities that are very aware of all this funding that's coming and then quickly set things up. And that's why I think that training centre went national because
yeah.
you've got access to tens and tens and tens of thousands of pounds of money because engineers around the country, they'll see that advertised, oh, get a free course. You might have to pay 100 to it. It's not always free, but you get a free course. And so they go on it. They've not bothered about looking up about heat pumps or looked at YouTube videos or done any other courses. They go on it and they get qualified. And the
Yeah.
real winner is that training centre.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that really sticks in the craw for installers because it's not. I know some really good heat pump installers, and believe me, they're not making millions of pounds.
No.
I mean, well, maybe they are, but they're not telling me. And we're not. It's a difficult business to run. It really is. It's even harder business to make money in. And so I think one of the things that actually I saw raise the eyebrows of some of the committee as I said it was that it cost me around £30,000 to take on an apprentice. Now there's a couple of caveats to that. Firstly, I do think unless somebody is living back home with mum and dad or whoever, the apprenticeship wage is not enough to live on. So the rules are that if your apprentice is under 19, you can pay them the apprenticeship wage, which is significantly lower than the national minimum wage. Um, and then once they finish if they're over 19, once they finish their first year, they have to be paid the national living wage for their age. And one of the things I've said many times is that women and a more diverse group often come to this industry a little bit later than sort of straight out of their GCSEs. So inevitably, I'm taking on people who are in their early 20s, which that by the time I've taken national insurance and pension and wages into account is about what it costs to employ somebody on national living wage. And then you throw into the mix that if you employ somebody who who doesn't always work at the same place of work. So they're called a peripatetic worker, i.e. a plumber or a heating engineer who's, always at different sites. Then actually officially, as far as the minimum wage goes, their working day starts from the moment that they leave the house. So if you think about it, you've then got to factor in to how much you're paying people per hour, the fact that they might be working from 7:30 when they leave home, right back to when they finish. So, you've really got to be incredibly careful if you are paying people near to the minimum wage. So, yeah, it makes it expensive. And then, we can't afford to put any of our 20 whatever year olds into vans. So they've got to drive their cars separately to the job, which then we pay them mileage for, or they've got to be picked up by one of our existing engineers. And all our vans are insured for 25 and over.
Mm,
Actually, one's even insured for 30 and over. And we still have an enormous kind of like 20K a year insurance bill.
mm,
And that's partly reflective of the fact that I've got 4 extra headcount on my book. So, all these things add cost before you even start to think about whether you get your apprentices tools and uniform, um, all those kind of bits and bobs. It is massively expensive to take on apprentices, and it's gutting as an employer to see yourself laying out all that cost in the, like, fingers and toes crossed hope that they stay on with you once they've qualified, because obviously that's when you start to actually kind of claw some of that money back. But you can't require them to, and would you want to? Also, if they want to leave, they want to leave. They're not going to be a good employee. So yeah, that's a really big issue. And then you see all these millions going off to training centres who literally have to employ somebody, as you say, who's a qualified assessor who happens to have done the course, to stand there and deliver some PowerPoint slides. I mean, man, that's
I mean,
that's absolutely gutting.
the course would argue, well, we do hands-on stuff as well, Nathan. Not really. I've asked people that have been on these training courses, do you get shown heat pumps? And apparently there's only one manufacturer's heat pump there, and it got switched on. The assessor said, look how quiet that is. And then it got switched off. That was it. That was it. So the
Mm.
rest of the training, because part of their assessment is actually sometimes, I think, to sort of maybe a fault find on something, but some of them are
And
just ticking it off.
maybe there are people out there doing it really well. We can't
There'll
knock
be
them all.
definitely, yeah, there'll be.
I'm sure there are. But even if you deliver an absolutely amazing, action-packed, brilliantly hands-on, superbly delivered 4-day course, you're telling me that 4 weeks later, those people who've been on that course, maybe 3 months later, maybe 6 months later, when they manage to sell a heat pump, are actually going to deliver that heat pump well? I I doubt it.
Well,
And so how do you bridge that gap?
a lot of the comms has been saying, we need. I always forget the numbers. Let's say it's 12,000. We need 12,000 more heat pump installers. Great news, £5 million more to the heat training grant, which will assure or guarantee these thousands of these installers. And I'm like, no, it won't. You're just guaranteeing people are going on a course. That's it. You're
Mm,
not guaranteeing they're going to be the installer work base that we need, because most of them will go on that course think I don't got a bloody clue what I'm there doing, and I won't get involved in it. Um,
mm.
so it doesn't guarantee anything. Um,
So, I mean, what if you then made some money available to mentoring people?
well,
Barry's doing it off his own back. He doesn't get any paid for it.
well,
What if that was some sort of funding for that?
the point you picked up on is like how much it costs you, and you really want to take on people.
Mm,
That's why you started up to take on these people and
yeah.
train and obviously get more women into the industry. But it's costly, and my argument has been for a lot of years is if you look at training across the board, whether it's you're getting your NVQ plumbing and heating, or what happens is you got a college component. Now, the college component actually is minimal. So, an apprentice goes to college for 1 day of the week and the 4 days they're out working. Sometimes there's block release involved. So, sometimes they'll work for 5 weeks non-stop with their employer and then they'll go on a week block at the college. But the college is only sort of like 1/5, and yet they get most of the money.
Not even a
And
fifth though, is it? I mean, they've got holidays, so
exactly, they get most of the
probably only
money.
do like 40 weeks a year.
And that money, if you look where that money's been spent, I've worked in 6 colleges, I've worked in a prison teaching, and it's paying all the wages. It's not only paying my wages as a lecturer, it's paying the workshop manager's wage, it's paying the senior leadership team, it's paying the principal, it's paying all
Mm.
the HR, it's paying this massive, massive thing of, they're bloated industries, colleges, in essence. And, I'm not really worried about other trades, but if we really want to suss our trade out, the government have got to really look at it and think, right, people learn best when they're out there working with people like your Barrys and Emmas and Leahs, etc. Let's help them take on people then, whether it's
Mm.
newbies or whether it's engineers that want to transition. Let's give them the money. You don't actually need a college. You don't need lecturers like me standing in a college delivering from PowerPoints. And as you would know, I don't like delivering for PowerPoints. I'm a big advocate of active learning, but you're time constrained within a college. Colleges work to a time thing, so because otherwise they don't get their funding. You've got to pass people, and you've got to pass them within a certain amount of time. So I'd argue you don't actually even need colleges. I mean,
I think the thing that my guys tell me they do appreciate about being in college is the opportunity to practice like the really basic stuff, like soldering pipes and pipe bending when you're not in a customer's home in front of your colleagues, kind of, the opportunity to have that workshop time, they do definitely
yeah.
value.
Yeah, and
So
that's been
and
going on for
that's
years.
that's
I mean,
easy
I
to
I met with
see.
the octopus apprentices the other day, and yeah, they were doing pipe bending, and good on them, and they were really enjoying it. And yeah, that's something I obviously used to enjoy teaching in the college, the sort of pipe bending skills. So yeah, but I mean, that's done on the ordinary plumbing apprenticeship.
Yeah,
Sorry, done on the college component of the apprenticeship or the
yeah.
diploma certificate. Because this is another thing I don't think people realise is, I mean, it's kind of changed a little bit, but hundreds of thousands of people every year sign up for college courses, trade courses, and they don't get apprenticeships because the employers out there to employ them. So when I started teaching in 2006, within 5 years, City and Guilds had issued 250,000 certificates to people who had gone on the course. A very, very small minority of them were apprentices because there just isn't the employers out there to take them on. But when that NVQ system was engendered back in the early 90s, so when I went to college, the only people going to college were apprentices. You had to be
Mm.
employed. But then it changed. So the college component of sort of what was the apprenticeship now could be taught to anyone. So anyone could enroll on what was called back then a technical certificate. Now it's called the diploma. So colleges again were making lots and lots. I mean, don't get me wrong. Actually, colleges don't make too much money because their profit is
Mm.
lost. But awarding bodies make millions because they are literally just churning out paper certificates. So it used to be in my day, and I remember my dad telling me this: get your sitting guilds, lad, because that's a good thing to have. Because if you were
Mm.
sitting guilds, you were deemed as apprenticed. Nowadays, millions of people have sitting guilds paperwork. Doesn't mean anything. It just means they've gone to college.
And maybe that's where you start. Maybe those people coming out of the end of that diploma process, maybe you start to find a way to incentivize employers to take them on. Because actually they're a relatively attractive hire. Because if
Yeah.
they've stuck with that, but what is it? Is it a 2 year? How long do they do the diploma for?
Yeah, it's 2 years for level two, and then 3
So
if they want
say
to get
they've
onto their
done,
level three.
yeah, so say they've done the diploma all the way through to, level two, level three. As an employer, you know that they've already done the college component
Mm.
of being an apprentice. So, obviously the people that I'm currently employing, I lose them one day a week to go to college. So what if there was some way of incentivizing employers? Say, look, we've got these people, they've stuck with it, they've got a bit of perseverance, they've got the head knowledge. Now they need you to take them on. And if after working with you for 2 years they could be like reassessed, or 3 years or whatever it took, they could then be reassessed and be awarded the NVQ part. I mean,
Yeah,
that would be a
that that
fantastic
that
thing.
does go on. So employers will. So some of the employers I used to chat to when I was in colleges, they would want to take on someone that's either doing their diploma or
Mm.
finished their diploma. They did hit an issue though, because they might have took someone on that had done their 3 years diploma level three, who got aced all their modules, 100% in all their modules, but get them on site, they're useless,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
just being
exactly.
able to take an online exam doesn't necessarily mean you're sort of equipped or going to be able to be good in the
But
workplace.
that's tragic. I mean, how do you let somebody do 3 years of that and then be rubbish on site because they've just wasted 3 years of their life?
Well, it's a big
It's
industry.
awful.
It helps with NEAT. So you
Mm,
always forget what's down, not in education or employment or training. So it keeps the
yeah,
figures low
wow.
of unemployment. The Association of Colleges loves it because all the colleges have got bums on seats. But yeah,
Mm,
yeah. So many people that have done diplomas in bricklaying, plastering, plumbing, electrician are not out there now working. And we're talking millions. We are
that's
talking
a
millions.
scandal, isn't it? An absolute scandal.
And yeah, it's a problem. And what was the other thing I was going to say about the employers
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
struggling with when they take on diploma students? I can't think of it now. It'll come back.
Can they then turn it into an MVQ if they take them on for a number of years and they do their portfolio?
Oh, crikey. They used to be able to do it very easy.
Okay.
I think that's got made hard. So I've known people lovely people, who are police people, firemen, who are sort of coming to the end of they're coming out of that work, and they came on that diploma course. Now they struggled a little bit because, well, you not all of them struggle, but you've got to be you're mainly in classrooms of 16 to 18-year-olds, so
Mm,
unless you can handle that, that's the thing. And of course they got really passionate. I mean, if they're listening to lectures that sort of come from the industry, they're really passionate about learning, and these would be your sort of 100% students, like getting the 100% on all the module exams. Now, what would happen is they would realise they're only getting a diploma, they're not fully qualified, they need an MVQ. So, what some of them would do is, for literally about 5 days, go and spend some time with one of the other lecturers. So, now I never had my own company while I was lecturing, but some other lecturers did. So, these students would then go, they're mature students,
mm,
and what you're doing is basically you're just standing in front of a job getting a portfolio signed off. You don't even
mm,
really have to do it that day. If as long as you've got the photographic evidence of you
mm.
putting a bath in, and you fill out your portfolio. So
Yeah,
people were getting their NVQs and literally like that. And then guess what? Uh, One of the people I'm thinking of got his NVQ and then became a teacher the next year. They were now lecturing in college.
right, wow.
Never done the job in their life. No, don't get me wrong, lovely person, and I'm sure once again they can facilitate learning
Mm,
if they're very good at engaging with young people, and this particular person was, that's going to help that young person. But they haven't come from industry, don't know the industry, they knew how to pass the exams on the mod, and this is going on all over really.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, and that is another point, isn't it? How do you get mature students into the industry? It's something Patrick from Vito Energy and I were talking about a few months back. Yeah, if you've got somebody who's come to you from, a teacher or whatever, they're really keen to work in the industry, you can get them out on site. And they may have, they may have a fair amount of hands-on skills because they've done DIY and they've done stuff in their house and whatever. And as you train them up, what do you then do to get them qualified? Because they are unlikely to want to sit 1 day a week with a bunch of, 16, 18-year-olds. So as I understand it, with gas, you can go and do like a gas course from nothing and become a gas engineer. I know that's frowned upon, but what is the better way to do it within heat pumps so that people can come across into the industry? I mean, the whole trades thing is so ridiculously siloed. For example, one of my apprentices is a carpenter, a totally experienced and trained carpenter. She's now training up as an electrician. She had to go right back to the beginning. There's no opportunity to jump a year, so she's back doing health and safety stuff and all the
Mm.
basic stuff that she'll have done on her carpentry course
which is
and having
ridiculous
to do it again.
because I know Abby, and Abby's been
Yeah,
working on building sites for donkey's years,
I
and
know.
she would probably know way, way more than
Yeah,
most of her
exactly.
lecturers. But yeah, and she really would.
Yeah.
I mean, if let's say I had a company, I mean, this is how I would do it. If I had a company, I would take people on, and first of all, I'd really, really have a stringent process in place to see if they are really passionate about learning. And
Mm.
there is ways to do that, and we did that, didn't we, with our cohort? You want to suss out if people are really invested in learning, have took ownership of their own learning, because it's very easy, especially with adults, to say that they're really passionate about something, and then you find out that they're not. And I used to do this with some of my adult cohorts that I used to teach at evening classes, and because a lot of them would try and cajole me to start up a company so they could get their MVQ. And after about 6 weeks of me teaching them one night a week, I'd say, look, are you really passionate? No, we're really, really passionate, Nathan. We'd love you to take us on so we can get our income. And I'd be like, you super duper passionate? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'd ask them a question, and I was a bit cheeky doing it. I'd get them to do it like quite formally as well, like a little. Give them a bit of paper and say, right, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. I'd say, like, what's the make of your thermostat at home? What's the make of your boiler? How many radiators you got? And the amount of people that didn't even know how many radiators they got in
Mm.
their own home or they make their boiler. And I say, what, you're really passionate about learning the heating industry. You can't even tell me what heating system you've got at home. And they felt a bit sheepish. So
Mm.
you want to find people that are really passionate about learning. There's ways to spot that. And then what I do is they learn on the job. They learn on the job with me or with my engineers. And then it doesn't have to be one day a week, or it could be when I think it's appropriate. I would then, I mean, obviously I've got the skills to, I would then deliver some theory about what they've been doing day to day that week, particularly. And rather than them toddling off to college where the lecturer doesn't know exactly what they were doing during that week, because they work through a structured sort of a module. You do your health and safety first, and sometimes people will do scientific principles, sometimes people leave that to the end. But you're not relating it to the tasks that them
No, that's the
people have
thing.
done. So you'd get everyone has to do their health and safety first, which some colleges take 6 weeks to do. So you've got all these students learning about what's the safe working height and all this, and what, they've never been up a scaffold, so they're having to
No.
answer all these questions about scaffolds and all this kind of thing, stuff that they can't relate to because they've not done it yet. So that's how I would. You can't learn this trade without being on the job, and I think let's say for instance, like an SME like you or larger ones, they could probably employ or have someone fund someone a qualified assessor or educator, maybe not so much an
Mm.
assessor, because getting an assessor's walls is easy nowadays, and then anyone that seems like think they can teach, but get someone that's good at educating, who comes in every now and then to facilitate some learning around what the people would do in that particular week or month. And go over the theory, because obviously the theory is quite, and people can go off and learn a theory at home as well.
Mm.
We call that blended learning or flipped learning. Um, you
Yeah,
don't
you
need,
could you
you
could
don't need,
almost imagine like a little kind of group of SMEs who all had an apprentice or so themselves, and then maybe it's a local authority thing. Maybe the local authority then employ someone who is in charge of making sure, okay, we're going to give you some money towards the wages of these apprentices, but in return for that, we want to make sure that they're really learning stuff.
mm,
That they're not just standing in the doorway passing the spanner, that they're actually really getting involved and really learning stuff. So then you would then have somebody employed who actually, like, as you say, was the educator and was a facilitator and made sure that those people were having a good experience. Because obviously, the minute you start giving SMEs money to take on apprentices, then all sorts of horrible things are liable to happen. People just taking them on and treating
yeah.
them badly.
You
So
could have that
got to be
lovely word again.
careful.
You could have a peripatetic learning facilitator. I used to love that word. I used to call
Yeah.
myself a peripatetic pop-up podcast before COVID, and I realised you could do them on Zoom. But no, you could have a peripatetic learning facilitator. So
Yeah.
let's say 10 SMEs were given some money to take on 10 apprentices, or let's say two each. And so so they're working on the job, so they're learning.
Yeah.
Now, the good thing about that is you've then got this situation where these 10 SMEs realize they're part of this larger cohort.
Yeah.
So they then start talking to each other. So that's you, Barry, and Emma, for instance. You start talking to each other, and you
Mm.
start talking about what is working, what's not working with your apprentices, because this is very important. So there used to be a guy called, what was his name? He was an Australian guy, John something. He used to write every 2 years, I think. He used to write this list, what had the highest impact on learning in
Mm.
education. And the number one feedback was up there, but I think the number one for a couple of years was what was called, what was it called? Gosh, effective teacher. teacher efficacy. Oh, I can't think of it. Can't think of it. But it's basically where all the tutors would get together regularly and discuss what is working, what isn't working.
Oh, okay.
Something so simple.
Yeah.
And it was something so simple, yet it had the highest impact
Wow.
on learning. I'll have to put that in the show notes because it's annoying me. I forgot what it's called. John Hattie was his name. Collective Teacher Efficacy, CTE.
Okay.
So simple. So that would work in our sort of situation where you owners of the companies are getting together maybe once a month. Oh, this really worked, you know, and
Mm.
I noticed the engineer, the apprentices really sort of did well when this sort of happened. You've then got the facilitator going around that particular cohort as well, who's a big part of that as well. You've got the apprentices are all part of that collective as well that think that there's value to that. You don't need to go to this college. And then you could have that funded. Now, obviously, that could be
Mm.
funded by the government rather than paying, wasting my money. You know, I work bloody hard now for my tech. You do, and it is getting wasted. And anyone can debate me on that. It's getting wasted, and it's going to be more value if we want really, really competent, qualified engineers. This, you know, other methods or other ways of doing this would be more beneficial. And you could get manufacturers maybe fund it or help fund it. You know, because it's hard for USMEs to take on apprentices, cost wise. But you, at the same time, you're all quite excited about it. You would love to give, well, you do. I know you do. You love giving that valuable
Mm.
opportunity to the apprentices you got, and Barry, Emma, the same. But I was quite shocked when they announced that that they're giving more funding to it again. It was a big fanfare around it, as if it was like great. And I've kind of already mentioned quite a lot to some quite high up people that it's not actually that great at all.
I mean, our little scheme that we've just dreamt up, you could throw the whole mentoring thing into that as well. So that same cohort of SMEs who were being supported, I mean, supported financially to take on apprentices, could also at the same time be mentoring some installers who've done the BPAC or LCL BPEC or LCL awards course, couldn't they? And in the same way, that could be a little bit overseen and facilitated. And I mean, one thing I really hope with this money, because I know you have made your voice heard, and I know others have as well. Maybe this time they're going to be a little bit sharper in the way that they assess the people who've been on this training course. Because I mean, what I'd love to know is 6 months later, how many heat pumps have you fitted? Have you got your MCS
Well, this is the big problem.
accreditation now?
They're all
Uh,
assessed with multiple choice, though, that nothing will change there because within assessment, so anyone that's got their assessment award, and it's the A1, well, it was the A1, that's what I've got. It was the D32 before that. But there's this whole body of works behind assessing. Okay, it's quite weird because basically it comes out basically with the premise that everyone passes. So if people are struggling to know an answer or something, you get taught techniques on how to sort of prompt them in a way that you're not telling them the answer, but you're guiding them along to get to the answer eventually. But in our industry, everyone get passes because it's multiple choice and they're allowed to retake. So that assessment isn't going to change. The other thing you mentioned there is there's no efficacy studies on this. So
That's what I mean, more efficacy than
no one is
assessment.
really
Yeah.
studying the impact of learning. So I have had an official response from the people at there's a Midlands Net Zero and Nottingham Council kind of run this. I said, well, how do you know this is, because their comms is like it's really successful. I said, well,
Mm,
how do you know it's successful? And their response was 56 or 58% of people said it was good. They felt the training
right.
was good. And as we found out, only 2.3% of people answered the survey where that question was asked. So
Well,
that's
I
not,
think you should follow up a reply to that and
and
say,
that's,
I understand that they thought the training was good. That's lovely. But please, can you tell me what you're doing to find out whether they're actually going to get better at installing heat pumps?
yeah, and it also doesn't test the impact of learning. So what you're doing there, if people go on a course and they've learned something which they feel they never knew, they'll come out and say, "Oh yeah, I really enjoyed that."
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it had an impact on their learning. Well, you're not testing their learning 6 weeks later, right? Can you recall this? Can you remember this? Do you know what to do in this situation?
Mm.
None of that's being done, and you'd think that would be done because this is taxpayers' money that's funding this,
Yeah.
but no, that's not being done. I mean, whether they got something planned to do that, because I've been banging on it.
Well, I'd go back. I'd write back and say, thank you for your response. Can you tell me what you're going to do to, I mean, even if they're going to install some more heat pumps, that would be a start. How many heat pumps have the participants installed in the last 6 months?
Well, I've heard. on the grapevine. So that heat training grant came out, I think, 2023,
Okay.
and someone looked at the I've not been on, but the heat MCS sort of is it the data dashboard?
Yeah,
Apparently,
I
you can
thought that's
extract some
right.
good data from that, and they've sort of looked at some of the data, and there's a trajectory of how many people are being signed up to MCS over the
Mm.
years, and if you look at the trajectory, it's going up, obviously,
Yeah.
but they looked at the trajectory of when that heat training grant started and when it finished, which was a few months, and the trajectory doesn't change.
Wow.
And I
That's
think they even worked out that only, despite I think 14,000 people have been on that course for the last amount of funding,
mm.
I think they worked out something like only 56 people joined MCS from it. Now
Wow.
I don't know that'd have to be factual, but what but you can guarantee anecdotally. I ask a lot of engineers. You meet a lot of engineers. The people that have been on that course. Do you think you go out and do heat pumps now? No, not at all. Now the Heat Pump Association are now sort of not U-turn, but they're Scott saying, well, it's just the start of your journey. Well, not really. If you that's the actual official qualification to put a heat pump in. You're
Mm.
funding people to get the official qualification. It's
Yeah.
not good really now calling it, well, it's just the start of your journey. No, the start of your journey was, doing other stuff,
Mm.
listen to podcasts, looking at YouTube videos, learning, reading books, not getting the official qualification. And of course, you imagine if you're a building developer and you want a company, an SME company, to come and install you loads of heat pumps, and you've got to develop a contract that says, oh, all my engineers are heat pump qualified, we'll do all your work because they've sent all their labourers and everyone on a heat pump course that's 3 days and now they're proper qualified. That really looks
Mm.
good, and that contractor wins the work with the developer. And of course, as we know, that work's going to be rubbish, um, I imagine. But it's just so bizarre. It's such an important industry. We've got thousand people talking about it, and we can't get that single thing right. Now, so going back to the thing that you gave evidence to, do you think that has potential to really look at the nitty gritty of this and get things right?
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I mean, they they're there and they're listening, and the minister responds. So, I mean, all all I feel is that the more people that you can say the same thing to, even if you feel like you're a broken record, say it clearly, say it nicely, come up with some positive ideas. You've just got to keep saying it, and sooner or later, hopefully someone will listen. Because I mean, what else can you do? Um, yeah, it felt a bit like, they were, as I said at the start, they were a bit on a different trajectory. Kind of, does it matter? Have you heard of the Office for Green Energy Jobs? Like, well, no, not really. And yeah, I suppose the things that they can influence aren't necessarily directly related to what I do every day, are they? But it's funding at the end of the day. Where does the follow the money? Where does the money go? Can they find some way of supporting SMEs? Because people are not taking on apprentices,
Mm,
and the numbers and everything show that. So somebody needs to do something about it.
mm. Well, I know you've got to rush up soon. You're going over to see a heat pump abroad with one of the last guests I had on, don't you?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Dan Large has organised a trip over to Chronoterm in Slovenia, and myself and a few others are heading over to look at their heat pump. So go and see if it's all that it's cracked up to be as far as Dan says. If Dan says it's good, I'm 99.9% certain it is. So let's go and have a look.
Oh, brilliant! And Barry's going as well, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And Alex from the warmer group. So yeah, a
He gets
few
invited to
others.
everything, Barry, doesn't
Yeah, well, he's reasonably good company on a good
he?
day.
He is. He's got some. He and I have got some good stories of when we were in
Just don't
Denmark.
try it out drinking, mate, Nathan.
Well, that wasn't it. And when I can't leave it
Yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah. It's not
That
what I've
was
heard.
that's you sound like my daughter now. You're trying to drink a Scotsman, out drink a Scotsman. No, I wasn't. Um, it's been fantastic to have you on the show again.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for the opportunity to continue to rant. But I think we've just got to politely and nicely and with a positive tone keep saying this stuff because it's true and people need to listen.
Well, I hope I come across. I'm always very conscious that I don't come across polite because I can I get very emotional about this particular
Yeah, it's
topic, and
frustrating, isn't
I
it?
never
It's
know whether I'm
frustrating.
being a bit horrible or not. But I don't mean to be. I'm just quite passionate about.
Yeah.
an area I know quite a lot about.
Mm,
I'm not right in lots of things, but this is an area I do know a lot about. Leah, thank you ever so much, and you enjoy your trip.
no problem. Thanks, Nathan. Cheers.
See you
Bye now.
later. Bye.